Picture a country 3 times the size of France, yet home to fewer people than a single large city. A country where you could ride on horseback from sunrise to sunset without crossing paths with a single soul. A country whose capital is the coldest on the entire planet, colder than Moscow, colder than any city you have ever heard of. A country wedged between the 2 largest neighbors on Earth, Russia and China, without a single stretch of beach, without one drop of sea. And all of this is real. How is it possible that the second largest landlocked country in the world has, in the 21st century, almost nobody living in it? The answer lies in one of the most extreme and unlikely places human beings have ever, stubbornly, chosen to call home. Today, I am going to tell you why almost nobody lives in Mongolia. I am going to show you how a handful of people cracked one of the harshest territories on Earth and turned the impossible into an ordinary routine. And I am going to reveal the secret that almost nobody notices. This emptiness, far from being permanent, is being emptied even further right now, as you watch, and the way of life that made all of it possible may not survive to the end of this century. Let us start with the sheer size of the thing, because this is where your head already begins to spin. Mongolia covers about 600,000 square miles. To give you a sense of that, it is bigger than Alaska. It is more than twice the size of Texas. It is all of France multiplied by 3. It is an enormous territory, the size of a small continent. And how many people live across all of that? Around 3.5 million. That is it. The city of Los Angeles and its metro area alone hold more than 3 times that number. All of Mongolia, this giant between Russia and China, has fewer inhabitants than many cities you could drive across in a single hour. When you spread that population out over all that land, you get a number that does not feel real. For every square mile of Mongolia, there are only about 6 people. Only 6. It is the lowest population density of any sovereign country in the entire world. No other nation on Earth has so much ground and so few people to fill it. Think about what that means in practice. It means there are plains where the horizon is nothing but grass and sky, plains the size of European countries, without a single house, without a single power line, without a single road. It means silence, a silence so vast it almost has weight. But a country does not become empty by accident, and if there are so few people scattered across so much space, one obvious question comes up. Where exactly did all those people end up? The answer is surprising because it contradicts the very image we have of Mongolia. When we think of this country, we picture nomadic horsemen, tents on the steppe, herds stretching as far as the eye can see, and that does exist. But that is not where most of the people are. Today, roughly half of Mongolia's entire population lives in a single city, Ulaanbaatar, the capital. 1 out of every 2 people in the whole country is packed into the 1 dot on the map. And if you add in the few other cities, you find that close to 70% of Mongolians already live in urban areas. In other words, the emptiness of Mongolia is not an emptiness spread out evenly. It is a brutal contrast. On one side, an overcrowded capital growing far too fast. On the other, an almost deserted vastness where the ones who stayed behind on the steppe live more and more isolated, farther and farther from one another. It is as if all the human weight of the country had slid down and piled up in one corner, leaving the rest of the map blank. You could get in a car in Ulaanbaatar, drive for hours in a straight line, and watch civilization simply vanish in the rearview mirror until nothing was left but hills, rivers, and that endless grass. And here is the detail that gives you chills. This concentration is not old, it is not tradition. It is recent, and it is speeding up. Something is pushing people into that city, away from the land where their grandparents were born. We will get there, because that is the most unsettling part of the story. But first we need to understand the question nobody asks properly. It is not just why there are so few people, it is why nobody was ever able to truly spread out across this territory. And the answer to that does not begin with history or with politics. It begins with the very air you breathe there. The air of Mongolia is perhaps the biggest reason for all of it. And to understand that, we have to talk about Ulaanbaatar, because it carries a title almost nobody believes when they hear it for the first time. Ulaanbaatar is the coldest capital city in the world. Not one of the coldest, the coldest. It is the only capital on the entire planet where the average temperature across the whole year stays below freezing. Colder, on average, than Moscow. Colder than Astana. Colder than Reykjavik, up in Iceland. At the peak of winter, just before the sun comes up, the thermometer plunges to 30, 40 degrees below zero. The entire city works, functions, and breathes in that bone-cracking cold. Now, here comes the part that defies logic. Where do you think Ulaanbaatar sits? Way up north, hugging the Arctic? No. It sits at roughly the same latitude as Paris, on the same line as Seattle, as Vienna. Cities that have cold winters, yes, but nothing. Absolutely nothing, like 40 below. So why? This is where legend meets reality. Some people imagine Mongolia as a kind of cursed frozen desert, a frozen edge of the world. Others, half joking, blame the shadow of Genghis Khan as if the land held some ancient curse. But the truth has nothing magical about it. It is pure physics, and it is more astonishing than any legend. Mongolia is lodged right in the middle of the largest landmass on the planet, Eurasia, hundreds and hundreds of miles from any ocean. And the ocean, even though we tend to forget it, is the great thermal blanket of the Earth. It stores heat in winter and eases the heat in summer, softening the climate of everything near it. Mongolia has no such blanket. It is too far from the sea to receive any relief at all. Add altitude to that. Ulaanbaatar sits more than 4,000 feet above sea level, and the higher you go, the colder it gets. And on top of all that, during winter, a gigantic mass of heavy freezing air, coming down from Siberia, settles over the region and simply refuses to leave. That cold air pours down and pools in the valley where the city was built, like water in a bucket, and stays there, trapped for weeks on end. It is not a curse. It is a position on the map. It is the price of living in the most continental place there is. And if you are the kind of person who feels a shiver of curiosity discovering this kind of thing, who loves understanding why the world is so strange and extreme, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to the channel because this is only the first layer of a journey that is going to get more and more improbable. But the cold, as bad as it is only half of the trap. Because even if you could endure the ice, you would still have to face the land itself. And the land of Mongolia was built to drive people away. The land of Mongolia seems to have been designed to make human life harder in every direction. Start with the south of the country, where one of the most famous and unforgiving deserts in the world stretches out. The Gobi, a sea of rock, gravel, and sand, where water is rare and temperatures swing from one extreme to the other between day and night. Move up the map a little, and the desert turns into steppe, those grass plains that look endless in photographs. Beautiful, yes, but dry, hard, and covering much of the territory. It is land that is difficult to plow, difficult to plant. Farming, which almost everywhere else in the world, is what allowed people to settle down and cities to grow. In Mongolia has always been small, almost an afterthought. In many regions, the ground itself is treacherous. There is what scientists call permafrost, layers of earth that stay frozen for much of the year. Building on ground that freezes and thaws is an engineering nightmare. Whatever you put up cracks, sinks, and warps. And, as if that were not enough, there is the political geography. Mongolia is the second largest country in the world, with no outlet to the sea. It is pressed between two giants, Russia to the north and China to the south, without a single port, without a coastline, without direct access to the ocean trade routes that made so many nations rich. Everything that comes in or goes out has to cross the territory of one of the two neighbors. Before we go on, tell me something down in the comments. What country are you watching this video from right now? I am curious to see how many corners of the world this journey is reaching. Now put it all together. Extreme cold, desert, dry steppe, frozen ground, no sea. It is a place that rejects the city and rejects the farm. And yet, human beings have lived there for thousands of years. The question is, how? How does anyone survive in a place that does everything it can to push them out? The answer is one of the most ingenious ideas in human history. And it is almost the opposite of everything we usually call civilization. Most peoples conquer difficult environments by settling down, building walls, cities, crops, standing still and taming the land around them. The Mongols did the reverse. They did not try to beat the steppe by standing still. They cracked it by moving. To this day, about a third of Mongolia's population lives as nomadic herders. They have no fixed address. They have herds, and they follow what the herds need. Pasture in summer, shelter in winter, water wherever water appears. When the land in one place is used up, they take the house apart and move on, letting the ground recover. It is wisdom thousands of years old, written not in books, but in the very way of living. And their home is a masterpiece. It is called a jur, what the West came to know as a yurt. It is a round tent made of a wooden frame covered in thick layers of wool felt. It looks simple, but it is perfect. A family can put up or take down an entire jur in just a few hours. It stays warm at 40 below zero, cool in the summer heat, and packs up onto a few animals or a small truck. It is a house that travels. The herds are the bank, the market, and the pantry of these people. Sheep, goats, cattle, horses, and camels. They all give meat. They all, and this surprises a lot of people, give milk. It is said that Mongolians make more different kinds of dairy, from yogurts to cheeses, than any other culture in the world. Nothing goes to waste. The wool becomes the felt of the house and the clothes on your back. The hide becomes tools. The animal becomes almost everything. Think about the level of knowledge that demands. Knowing how to read the sky, predict the snow, recognize every plant, every spring, every sign that it is time to move. These people, who from a distance look tiny and fragile against the immensity of the steppe, hold a mastery over that territory that no satellite, no city has ever had. And do not think for a second that they were always a small, forgotten people at the end of the world. Because there was a time when these very people, coming out of this very empty steppe, were the most feared force the planet had ever seen. At the end of the 12th century, the Mongol steppe was a patchwork of scattered tribes, fighting one another, exactly the kind of place nobody would ever imagine capable of changing the world. And it was from there, from that emptiness, that one of the most powerful names in all of history emerged. He was born with the name Temujin. He grew up in the hardness of the steppe, lost his father early, was betrayed, captured, nearly killed more than once. And even so, one by one, he united the Mongol clans scattered across those plains. In the year 1206, with the tribes finally gathered under his command, he received a new title, a name the whole world would learn to fear: Genghis Khan. What came next is almost unbelievable. Starting from that cold, dry, empty land, the Mongols built, in just a few decades, the largest contiguous land empire that has ever existed in the history of humanity. Not the largest empire of all time by population, but the largest by connected, unbroken stretch of land. At its peak, Mongol rule reached from Korea in the east of Asia to the gates of Europe in the west. We are talking about something on the order of 13 million square miles, around a fifth of all the solid land on the planet, under a single power, an empire raised not by a people of great cities, but by nomadic horsemen, the same ones who slept in, felt tense on the steppe. The mobility that kept them alive in the emptiness became the weapon that made them unstoppable, armies that moved faster than any enemy could imagine. Stop for a moment and feel the size of that irony. The country that today is the emptiest on Earth, the place where almost nobody lives, was once the exact center of the greatest empire this world has ever known. The same silent steppe you could cross today without seeing anyone was, 800 years ago, the beating heart of world politics. Emptiness, then, was never a synonym for weakness. It has already sustained empires. It has already produced conquerors. It was already the cradle of people who redrew the map of the entire planet. And that is exactly why the next part hurts so much. Because if this emptiness was once capable of so much, what is happening to it now should frighten anyone. Since the emptiness once sustained an empire, why does it now threaten to swallow the few who still remain? To understand the threat, you need to know a Mongolian word that carries a weight almost impossible to translate: idzud. The dzud is a slow, cruel disaster, made of two parts that combine to destroy. First comes a summer of drought, which keeps the grass from growing and sends the herds into winter already weak, with no stored fat. Then comes the final blow, a brutal winter of thick snow and extreme cold that buries what little pasture is left and kills the animals by the thousands, by the millions. and the numbers of the Dzud take your breath away. In the disaster of 2009 into 2010, Mongolia lost around 10 million animals in a single season, a fifth of the entire national herd, killed by cold and hunger in a matter of months. Years later, between 2023 and 2024, another devastating Dzud killed millions of head of livestock all over again, pushing tens of thousands of families to the edge of the abyss. For a nomadic herder, losing the herd is not losing a job. It is losing everything at once. It is losing the food, the income, the heating, the bank, the inheritance meant for the children. It is watching the work of generations vanish under the snow in a single season. And here is the darkest part of all. The Dzud has always existed. It is part of the ancient rhythm of the steppe, but it is becoming more frequent and more violent. Mongolia is one of the places in the world warming the fastest with climate change, warming at a rate estimated at about 3 times the global average. Summers grow drier, winters grow more unpredictable, and the disasters that once gave the steppe time to recover between them now repeat almost every year without a break. The land that the nomads spent thousands of years cracking is shifting beneath their feet, faster than the old wisdom can keep up. And here, I would really love to know your opinion. After seeing all of this, the cold, the isolation, the constant risk, but also the absolute freedom of a life with no walls, no boss, no address. Would you make that trade? Would you leave the safety of the city for that hard freedom of the steppe? Write it down below, because I am almost certain the comments are going to split right down the middle. Because when the herd dies and the steppe stops forgiving, the herder is left facing a choice that is no choice at all. And the road left to him leads to a single place. That place is Ulaanbaatar. With every Dzud, with every lost herd, thousands of families who have lived their whole lives on the steppe make the hardest journey of all. They come down to the capital. Not because they dream of the city, but because there is nothing left behind them. And they settle on the fringes of Ulaanbaatar, in what are called the Ger districts, where the traditional tents pile up on hillsides, without proper sanitation, without running water, without the infrastructure the city could not build at the speed people arrived. They trade the immensity of the steppe for a cramped patch of hillside, surrounded by thousands of other families in the same situation. And to keep warm in that 40 below cold, they burn coal, a lot of coal, multiplied by hundreds of thousands of stoves lit at the same time. The result is a smoke that swallows the whole city. At the peak of winter, Ulaanbaatar, the coldest capital in the world, becomes one of the most polluted on the planet as well, with levels of particles in the air that can run dozens of times over the limit considered safe. The very people who fled one danger on the steppe find another, invisible one, in the air they breathe in the city. There is no easy villain here, and it is important to be honest about that. On one side, there is the natural pull of the city. School for the children, a hospital, a job, a life with less risk of losing everything in one night of snow. On the other, there is a tradition thousands of years old fading away, a way of living found nowhere else on Earth disappearing, family by family. It is not right against wrong, it is survival against heritage, and both sides have a point. And so, the emptiest country on Earth lives out a cruel paradox. It empties its countryside even further, pushing the last herders away from the steppe, at the very same time that its one great city fills up until it suffocates. The emptiness grows on one side and chokes on the other. So, in the end of it all, what is really left of the emptiest country in the world, from the silent steppe to the 40 below of Ulaanbaatar, from the simple genius of the Ger to the largest empire history has ever seen, from the wall-less freedom of the herders to the coal-heavy air of the Ger districts. Mongolia is, at the same time, the portrait of emptiness and the proof that no emptiness is ever truly empty. And perhaps the greatest lesson of this story is this. The emptiness of Mongolia was never absence. It was always a bargain, a delicate bargain, negotiated over thousands of years between a stubborn people and a land that does not forgive. As long as that bargain held, the impossible became home. Every jur raised in the snow, every herd led across the steppe, was living proof that humanity can flourish even where almost nothing should be able to live. But every bargain can be broken. And what we are watching today, with the climate changing faster than tradition can keep up, is that ancient bargain beginning to crumble. When the last herder comes down from the steppe to the city, when the last tent is folded up for the last time, who will keep the silence that once sustained empires? The next time you look at a map and see that enormous blank space between Russia and China, do not think of it as an empty place. Remember that inside it, there are people who cracked the uncrackable, who made a home out of movement and a floor out of the cold. That space is not empty. It is only keeping in silence the secret of how to live where almost nothing should be able to live at all.